Yikaya hati adi, stakat yuhan, yag, Tlingit stugach tultu, wuj in. Qanachoy achtawasaku, Kadenaya yakanadain, hayukatangi inach. When qanins, hastudataya yutuchtatan. Achu ahanakaswu adi, ya achu atlatuku. Wasa achchitas awati, tlitzin, ka, tullawut. Yewe achtawasaku yisaku, ya kaya, yaak. Yan has ausane, ya haji yis. Kahadachkan kisani ay owa hayukatangi. Ye awe achtuwasagu kadin kakahi ako hayukatangi. Kakyaki awe ye kakwati. Kwash ya kaya kalkadain yu kakahtusha ati heshwasa kakwati. Just kakahtu ako. Achaya ye gahtusani. Ye awe hatuati. Achaya kahayati wujin. Qoshtiach kuksai wa'a. Wujin hasati awe yidat. Chikaikiach awe chikai hatuwasagu. Yautuwadlaki awe hayukatangi. Atchkach tulayech wan qanins. Helchastleit kach inach. Yewe achtuwasagu wan qanins jaslingit inach aqua. Adigach tu'a. Yeshukwa ayi. Achtuwasagu. Wujin yuchaguk tila adi. Aqa awe. Shtigach tultu. Kalchish. Ka wait datsu. Acho al. Chayuk ginki chakutye de ayayu haskatla atki. Achaway wal qiyakh adakhi haswati. De slin. Yakutan. Achtawasagu. Yiquu. Yiin quu. Yakhaya yukhiyatani. Ideka kwadashi an. Tashaan qaqasakhan etekh tuyena uyang. Wash chadasa aya adat. Itut wuhihi. Qawash adataya. Tashakan. Janak. Tashatinach itiyag. Wuchina ya heshwasak qati. Adeliach yati awe yag. Adeliach yati. Wan qanins yagu yektawe wudistin. Wudistinen aya kilja has to katu akut. Aqa awe yakti qa has kawashi. Adeli iduasagu at yat ayach. Qashtiach wasa. Tiktain awe iqusti achtawasagu yag. Qataku hinyach naqati awe ituwu. Yigu ayach one. So recap, welcome. I'm really glad you all are here. This is a really fun time for me when we're looking at Tlingit, studying it. We're just gonna try, we're just gonna learn. Nobody's chasing perfection here. We're just trying to sort of learn some things and try some things out. And it's okay if we make mistakes. It's okay if we get stuck and we gotta throw some English in there sometimes. It's okay if there's times like being on Zoom where like I'm really getting into a speech and then I'm frozen. I'm like, that was the best part. And but we're gonna try and use humor. We're gonna try and use a lot of different things. But what we're gonna leave at the door is any type of anger, any type of frustration, any type of worry. You really don't need that here. I'm trying to tell you how to be. I'm just trying to say, don't, if you bring all your burdens into the language, like it's just gonna, so no matter what's going on in your life, I want this to feel like a safe place. Like there are these things, sometimes I call them yakdi, sometimes I call them adeshi. So a long time ago when they're going in the canoe, like if if a storm just really came upon them, they would look for these shelters, and that's what they call it, either Adeishi or Yakutei. So that's what I'm hoping this is for us. It's safe, it's fun. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to just try. It's okay to get it wrong. It's all this stuff. It's fine, because we're gonna just work on some concepts and some fine tuning. I got a plan, and my plan is usually I just go all the way back to beginning Tlingit, and we just sort of zoom through that in the first week or two. Just sort of say, here's this thing, here's that thing, here's this thing. Make sure you got these concepts, because we're going to build on all of this stuff. And then I'm also going to hear from you folks and see where you're at, because it's like we're in a canoe and we got somewhere to go. But if we see this cool waterfall, we want to go over there and look at the waterfall, we go do that. And then I just want you to feel comfortable, no matter what's going on. I know some of us Zoom all day, Zoom all night. And so I understand fatigue. I understand a whole bunch of stuff. I also understand like all the reasons why people just sort of avoid getting there. But, I don't understand it, but I'm familiar with it. And so some of the things I think I also talked about, like if you scoop water out of a glacial river, you'll see all these sediments in there. But if you let it sit and it was in a clear container, it would all just settle down like that and the water would be clear. So they call that katequuhin. So I heard Kehinak tell us one time, let your mind be like that water that's run clear. So we're going to try and sometimes pace ourselves in here. It's not a race, it's not a competition. We're not going to get into sometimes there's just some negativity around language use and learning, and we're just gonna sometimes if we need to talk about it, we can. But the thing is, us talking with folks in Hawaii, it's like, I'm gonna fix this, I'm gonna fix that, then I'm gonna fix this, and they're like, just do the work and just ignore that stuff, because you'll just spend so much time and energy, and then you'll come out and you'll just be all muddy, and you'll be like, what happened? What did I do? Nothing. So I'm not saying, Cyril George, he told us that William Paul told him when he was in school. He came in and he said, a long time ago, like these two clans got in a big skirmish and they're kind of making up, and they said, okay, well, we got to send one of our guys over there to get killed, because we got to make this thing balanced. And he said, okay, well, you see those houses over there? You're going to run from behind those houses and then into this clearing, and then you'll go over behind this other house. We're going to line up our sharpshooters, and if they shoot you, you're done. But if you can sort of not get shot by these arrows, then you just go home. And that's how the setup story. And then he said, so the moral of the story is, if they're not shooting arrows at you, you're not doing a damn thing. And I like that line. I wasn't really sure how we got from that to that line. I was like, I'm in, I'm down, yes. So this is also a safe place where we can sort of decompress from some of the stresses of dealing with a language that's in trouble, dealing with a language that can be difficult at times to use and learn, and then any other things that are going on. I'm just hoping that this is like a little bit of an oasis for us, because I think that environment is important to be able to talk. The biggest thing we have to do this whole year is talk. You gotta make the language, and it's gonna have to start coming in bigger chunks than maybe you've done before. But we're gonna get there. So one of my general sort of goals is we'll have a week or so to just warm up, get to know each other, chat, study some stuff, make some good jokes. But then I want us to get into a rhythm where we start class entirely in Tlingit, and we just stay in Tlingit as long as we can. And we'll come up with all kinds of ideas. And so that way you can go and do your field work, put all your stuff together, dig through all the books, and then come back and then share some stuff. And then hopefully respond to what somebody just said. And if I'm talking a lot, that's okay. But then if it feels like we're kind of winding that part down, then we'll switch over to our lessons and just talking about language learning. Does that sound okay? Is everybody all right? Okay. Okay. So I thought maybe we'd start with some pretty straightforward stuff. So, shkagach tu sak, ye ewa wujin kagach tu nig hasayi, ha nach sati, wash gudach sawe, ha shagun, ha guksa awe uhan, dasa wo tu saku Tlingit dat, dasa hatu wasagu, wo saku. And I will translate that, and I will also put it into the chat, just so that we've got a record of it. So here's the questions, 4 questions that you're going to answer. And I'm not really big on like pressure or rigor or quizzes. I believe in hard work, but I believe there's a lot of stuff that that doesn't work well in education. And so, but there will be times as we get further along where I'm going to stop translating for you because I'm going to expect you to get a lot of it. But we'll get there, and you can always ask, and you can always ask questions. This is your space. I'm just kind of helping us to go along the path. So, wasa iduasak, what do you call him? What's your name? Gudach soe where are you from? Answer it however you want. Nobody's judging you. Dasa yisaku, hayu katangidat. What do you know about our language? Dasa tuasaku yisaku. What do you want to know? So I figure we'll start with just sharing that stuff, get to know each other a bit. We gotta get comfortable, because if you're comfortable, I think you'll talk. That's always my big thing. Okay, who wants to go first?
Yadukat. Yakayuk sitini yag to cut your hand. Cook your cut to a sock, think you canok, yet the hut to tea, ganok te di, I hut. Hitchy hit the hut to tea, cargo and tanyadi, I hut. Coach it, duck akish, Jil cut quan, duck, I hut. Kunchish. Think it you katangi, ye dat, click, cock enoch, a yakakwa. Tlingit Yukatangi Stuartu, Tlingit Yukatangi Shu Henaksa, what is Tlingit Yukatangi Aktawasagu Yisaku Wasaku, okay, Yisaku Tlesh Wasaku Yisaku. Cut say what cook.
Okay, goodness cheese. And if you got a particular way you like to spell your name, if you have a Tlingit name, put it into the chat, because that'll help us. I'm bad with names in every language, so just so you all know. Adu itzakuaha.
Alsakatuhan, Nilatogaya, Achtanakasai, Gunanashawu, Yuchatuasa, Klingitskunk, Gunanach, Satia Wetuhan, Gaftakwan. Ingit Yuchatangia Dak, Kalkawu, Huwe Yanakajin, Taltakat at Ayakwahe Gukudsati. Yui just like Tlingit you Katangi Tundatania way. Kwasaku. Achtwasagu. Achtwasagu. Yeah, you that go at Tlarkwasaku dasai Achtwasagu.
Trasa. Okay, sheesh. If you prefer your Danaka name, we'd be happy to use that. Adu itzakoha. Ferris Bueller ko atlatu. Kleidihina yewaka. Jaasa. Jaasa.
Jinkasi achsai dakluidi ayachet ki gushihet dach gleka yadi ayachet ka kagani haida dach ayachet ka junuk echetiti jegagink Tlingit yuchatangi khasiku shtuchaltu ka nouns khosiku ka verbs khosiku ka Tel chosiku, we put it all together. Ka joa, a joy, achtua sigu. I want to learn that.
Okay. A day which cut to schat would be kind of a fun way. It's like you're attaching them, tie something together. That's what Raven did with that. What was it? Teish on that on his nose or his beak. Let's call it bird's beak and nose because it's a sh. So I don't. Maybe I have a beak. I don't know. And nobody has a nose. Okay. El chish, kecha. Adu itza yidat ko. And just so we're clear, nobody's making any big speeches. Like we're just sharing stuff. So it's just an introduction, just getting to know each other. We'll talk a little bit after that about, or we'll talk like the whole semester long about nerves and waiting and silence, and it's all okay, no matter what. There's this time Raven defeated his uncle, went to his mom, and shot this black duck. I think those are the ones you see, and you go to up the Chilkoot and you see them, and then you know underneath them is the little fish. You know underneath the little fish are the fish that you want. And so my uncle Paul, he used to like to just go out there and watch those black ducks and reminisce about being fishing, because he'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go right there. I'm gonna go get them." But so he shot one of these ducks. I would duck. That's to shoot something with an arrow, or to pick out your gambling stick. And he cut it open, and he told his mom, "Atutkaku, atutku awe atli, Tlingitani ayashakukhleit, Hetwasakakwane idat koa, just you atkaki shatit." So he said, the world's gonna flood. You gotta get into this duck, Mom. The world's gonna flood, but nothing's gonna happen to you. You're just gonna float on the waves. And so that's an important thing. I come back to that a lot in my own mind. I was working on that story to share some personal stuff. I was working on that story when my mom was dying, and I was reading that line to her quite a bit. And so it has a really special place for me, but it also has a special place for me as someone who's helping people learn and who's using the language myself, is to just continue to reinforce nothing bad's gonna happen. You know, which is a really fun thing to say, because well, we can examine it later. Hechwasa. For some reason, that means okay. It doesn't match the other sort of patterns of keshdasa, keshasa, keshguksa. But keshwasa really means it's okay. And keshwasa gukwati idat. It's going to be okay around you. You're going to be okay. So I just want to reinforce that. And if you want to just tell us all the stuff in English right now, because you're feeling, everybody gets, sometimes the summer break is like a pretty serious break, which is fine. No worries. So you don't have to, and if it doesn't all come out right, that doesn't matter either. We're just getting to know each other.
I'll go. Benstein Greenach Ferris Bueller, je gaat door het zaal. Tlingit Greenach Kash, je gaat door het zaal. Kash, ach, zei Tlingit Greenach Frank, je gaat door het zaal. Saik, je gaat Yeti. What I know about our language. Dasa. What do I want to know? Skatnik. Let's see. Pucha.
Okay. Gonna sheesh. Yeah, so learning how to thread together narratives is really important. So we will be going over a bunch of stuff like that. Like, how do you get from one thing to the next thing? How do you tie things together? And how do you say, like, because of this other, there's like tons of that stuff. And then once you start getting some of those patterns, it opens up a lot for your just day-to-day talking. Because there's so much of what we do is stories. Like, oh man, I gotta tell you what happened to this. Oh, you know what? I was playing basketball, it was so awesome. And, and all these different stories. But then once we move into Tlingit, there's certain stories when you start telling those ones, the language has got to just jump up to this other level. But then it starts with the day-to-day stuff, which is, I think a lot of times when we used to teach Tlingit, we would always be teaching like this super elevated form of Tlingit. It's sort of like if someone came here and wanted to learn English. We're like, okay, here's the complete works of Shakespeare. We'll start with this. And then we'll move from that into like classic speeches of, like it's just like, let's just start with like a little cat running around or something like that. And so we'll be doing some of that stuff. We're gonna do a little bit of everything. So, sheesh. I do that too.
Thank you, Khune. Tlingit Khenak Kuchain, Tleka Khenak Aiden Bowers. Shaukani Dach Ach Kwani, my intermediate family, Angun Dach. As far as what I know about the language, I don't know a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. I was fortunate enough to work at some culture camps, so nouns, a lot of basic nouns, and then phrases that I've picked up along the way. What do I want to know? Probably what you said, Khune, on how to string narratives together and being able to use my language knowledge in regular conversation and not just have single nouns and phrases that are kind of hard to use in every situation. Pucha. Kurchish.
Sheesh, puchain, nekersatini. That means whose turn is it? I do itzakoaha. I'll just keep saying that. Like I just keep walking in on like a board game. I never know. I just never know whose turn. Yeah, I'm not good at picking people. So there's a lot of times where we'll just deal with it. But we'll also have some regular sort of scripted activities. And so it won't always be just so much waiting. That's okay.
Ansan yuhat duasak. Yesh nach city. Kikt adi ayachat. Zantak ahini. Yechat city. Yati. What do I know about the language? I know some phrases and words, and I struggle keeping them memorized. So I want to be able to really have it ingrained more. And also, I still remember your words, June, about normalizing the language. And I want to find phrases that I can use and teachers can use every day that not only has relevance in the classroom, but outside, in life. And just try to hone in on those phrases so that I can keep saying them and knowing that students will use them, in both contexts. So that's my goal.
Okay. Yeah, and those are important concepts. So like one is like normalizing a language, which means how likely are you to see it and hear it? It's like I walk around and, well, when you used to just go places, and like I'd go to a grocery store with my kids and I'd be speaking to them in Tlingit, and people would come up to me, oh, and we want that to be just not an abnormal thing. We want it to just be totally normal. And so I had these guys that owned the house we used to rent, and they told us, they're like, yeah, we don't speak Tlingit, but we know we used to hear it all the time, and we don't now. We lived in Huna, and you'd hear it in the post office every day, and now you don't hear it at all. And so when Bill Fawcett was alive, I ran into him, Kushtak Goish, in the post office, and we were just talking Tlingit. And at one point I realized we were whispering. I was like, why are we whispering? Nobody's gonna get what we're talking about. And he told me this really cool story. I'll tell you some other time. But so that's normalizing. It's just like making the language common. Then there's the vernacular, which is another sort of component, which is how do you make it the everyday language? Just talk about everything. Because what happens is if the language starts to, get lost, what happens is it stops being spoken in spaces and situations. We call those domains. So like people used to fish in the language. People used to hunt in the language. People used to do weaving and walking. They used to do all kinds of stuff, right, in the language. But now they don't. And so what you have to do is build up what's called a register. So it's like, okay, I want to go pick berries in Tlingit. Well, now you got to go do a bunch. You got to make sure you know these terms. You could take them on the road with you. So you could look up how to say, like, is it ripe? And, what kind of berry is it? And all this other stuff. And so, so those are some things. And we should be strategizing with this stuff too. Like, how do we get the language back? Like when everything blows over, when it just goes away, the coronavirus, maybe we all go shopping on the same night and stuff, just so we could chat in the language. And I know not all of us are in the same community, but then, so we're also going to explore this semester some different ways for us to just have time to just hang out in the language. Sometimes studying, sometimes talking, games, whatever. Because you got to kind of create that bubble everywhere you go these days. There's just so few speakers left. It's like, are you going to run into that one or two speakers that's around your community? Maybe you don't even have any. And so the other thing is just like, what do people talk about on a day-to-day basis? And let's figure out how to talk about that. Because something that I think happened with Tlingit is the last place where Tlingit was spoken was the ceremony. So then everything was a ceremony. So then you couldn't talk about, like, you couldn't make dirty jokes in the language, and you couldn't talk about like teaching a kid how to use the bathroom. There's a bunch of stuff you got to say there. And some of the elders they were getting really uncomfortable, and they're saying, we don't talk like that. And I was like, well, I think when you're raising kids, there's all kinds of stuff that you gotta say, like, never thought I have to tell someone about that, you know. But then in the language, and when you get into the language, it has all the vocabulary is there to do all that kind of stuff. So, but that's the other thing, is like, do you like to tease people? Do you like to talk about sports? Do you like to talk about a show? Do we like to talk about like who's running around with who? Like whatever types of things they are, we could do that in the language. So, okay, sheesh. Who hasn't gone yet? I know there's a few. I just want to hear from you.
I'll go. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Kinge gena atgwechi you gat doorsak. Leka gena ku tigen valavan you gat doorsak. Yech gat. Kwanlandan ye gat yati. Oh wait, no. Calgary ye gat yati. What do I know about our language? I need to practice more. And what do I want to learn? I want to learn how to gossip in Tlingit. I mean, wait, no, I want to learn how to tell stories.
Right. Hot goss. Let's do it.
But
Neek. You don't know if Neek is news or gossip. There's no way to tell.
One thing I really appreciated being on campus last year was being able to have like a sense of community and people to speak Tlingit Katangi with. But coming back or going back to my home community, it was really difficult to try to incorporate that. And then I realized I was a lot more nervous or awkward about it, speaking to non-speakers, or like figuring out ways how to bring that up without talking about the weather or something. so I like to practice more conversation, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, and as we engage in that stuff, like as we sort of push ourselves, like, hey, let's just switch over to Tlingit in a way that's more than just, hi, how are you? And so I had a friend, and we never like made any sort of agreement. We just started trying it out. And one day, like, I saw this person and I said, oh, yik'ech satini. And that person said, oh, huatsu, osasiyati. I said, hetwasa khatuti wa eqo'a. Khat yik'eh. And I said, dasayida ine. And the person said, siudaku satan. So I said, siudaku satan. So like one of the things, like we were having a back and forth, right? Like, good to see you, you too, how are you? I'm fine, and you? I'm good. What are you doing? It's raining. Oh yeah, it is raining, right? And so just like, what I had to do was resist the urge to switch to English and say, well, actually what I said there was, you know, and so like, so just deal with the misfires if you don't, and we can give you some tools as well to just say, I understand that, but you can just keep going too. So
yeah. I worked at my local radio station over the summer, so I was like trying to incorporate Tlingit into the radio, and sometimes I wasn't sure if I was pronouncing things right, but I was like, nobody's phoned in yet, so I'm just gonna keep going.
hotlines are open.
I think I said part on the radio once by accident, and like someone told me that later, but
yeah, so coming back to mispronouncing things. I was working on a project. There was a group of us, and then we each paired up with an elder speaker, and we got them to record these phrases, and then we spent the afternoon writing like code so we can create this little kind of mini video game. And it was like so much work, and then you just had this like little tiny thing, but it was fun. But in the afternoon when we were writing this computer code, all the elders just went over to the counter with some snacks, or the corner. And also I just hear them laughing. And so I start listening, and they're telling a story about at a ku'ik, and this guy like gave a big speech. Then afterwards, someone stood up and they wanted to acknowledge and receive those words and basically say something nice back. And they wanted to employ a metaphor. So they wanted to say, and so like your words are like eagle down, right? Like downy feathers, which is a nice thing to say. But accidentally said, so your words are like a fart. And then they said, the one that he said that to stood up and said, Gunushchish, right? So happens to everybody. So like, we're not gonna sweat it. We're not, we're also, we should make a commitment here. Like somebody makes a mistake, we can laugh, we can have fun. We're not gonna laugh at people. Let us know if your feelings are hurt in any way. You can talk to me privately through the chat. If you let me know something, I'm happy to change course. And sometimes it's a really serious thing. Like sometimes we don't want anybody to get hurt. I like to laugh. I like to have fun. I'll reminisce about someone who said they wanted to say, I've been to the top of a mountain, a very tall mountain, but they didn't say mountain. And it was fun, right? And so, but what I try not to do is say, oh yeah, that was so-and-so, right? So let's remove the who said the thing, just like somebody said it. We got the fourth person. It was said, right? And so we'll commit to trying to do that so that if people are sharing stuff, we're not going to attribute it to them, or if something happens in here, we're not going to contribute to the hot goss of like what's going on in the language class, but we can certainly laugh among each other, Okay, who else? A couple more left. No pressure. It's like such a pressure-free zone.
I can go, if I may.
Ish.
Gunashchish yak ichwasatini. Tlingit enach. Kashuk kawadai yuchat duasak. Dleka enach. Scott Burton. Yuchat duasak. Don't hold it against me. California dach. Ayachat. Zanta kihinik. Yechat yati. Let's see, what do I know about our language? Very little, but I know it's been around for thousands of years and it's beautiful. I know a few place names, which I've really been enjoying learning. Anach ya Andagan Yi. I think that is the place where the sun first shines, which is what some people call Douglas Boat Harbor area. Of course, Yada Akasle. And Chas Hini, Kawae Hinaku, Shkuna Hinaku, Sayek, other place names here in what some people call Douglas. What do I want to know? More Tlingit literature and stories, more culture bearer names or more names of people, more place names, more sayings like let your mind be like the clear water that you shared earlier. Okay. Let's see. And what do I really want? I think is to have a mustache like Frank's. That's really, if I could have one of those, I would be pretty happy. Gunashchish.
Yak Gunashchish.
This is just from this morning.
Teen Wolf over there. So I was doing some, one of my colleagues always has these like great mustaches. Like he's always into like really into mustaches, right? And so like even his email signature is like a little, I don't know what you call it, that angle bracket thing, whatever. And so it looks like a little mustache that's kind of on his email signature. So I was telling him, I just started this, we're having this email conversation, and I just like, oh, did you know? And then it sort of spiraled right down the toilet. So I was like, Kan Khadadzai is what we call horsetail, that plant. And so the name of that plant is actually sea lion whiskers. And then I said Zai on its own, like you said, Zai would be like a long, lone, stray hair. Like one, like if you get older, like sometimes you just get this long hair that grows out. Like, what does that do in there? And it's all by itself. It's just like, boing, right? And so that's Zai. But then you can have Khadadzai, which would be for people, would be the mustache. And then Yadadzai would be, so you get Kha and Da. So it's around the mouth, but also means lips. And then Ya, Da, and then Zai. And so that's like then you got, there's one other place where you can get some Zai, but we won't go there yet. We're not ready. Okay, everybody else, and you don't have to, I'm not gonna make anybody do anything, but if you would like to tell us who you are and answer these same questions, and if you don't want to right now, it's okay.
Elias Minnick, you Khatwa Sak, Zantakini, Dach Ayakhat Ka, Zantakini, Ye Khat Yati. I know a few things about Tlingit, some verbs and place names and a few basic phrases. And I'd like to know more stories. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there are lots of narratives in Tlingit, and they're so fun. And some of the Raven stories, there's a whole huge collection of them. Some of them are really funny. Some of them are funny, but you're also like, that's not very nice. You know, it's just like all the trickery and killing people and eating them. Well, animals, I guess. But I'm not, you know, I'm like, well, I don't want to tell Raven what's going on, you know, because then he'll turn me to stone. But then you also have like this whole sets of clan specific narratives, which are really incredible, like Kakachguk and Pekanach up in Pakwan with the Tan and the Chesawa. And then just, it's fun because the more language you learn, then you'll see something. Like, so if I see a frog, I've got like 4 or 5 frog stories just kind of up there ready to go, you know, because and then there's an elder in Carcross named Shaustla, and she would laugh and she'd say her uncle one time got all the kids around. Haku, haku, achani qaike, yiidek shkakwashnik, yakeish. So he says, come here, everybody sit around me. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a wonderful story. And so they all sit down, they're all just ready. They're ready for the story. He goes, hoocha. And that was it. And then they all got really mad at it. And so like, it was funny because she told me that story. And then as my kids were getting older and I'd try it out, and they got so mad at me. So it's just like long time ago, that's it. It's over, right? And it's just a joke. It was just funny. But yeah, we'll learn some other we'll learn some more advanced narrative techniques. But that's still a pretty good one. Sheesh. Anybody else want to tell us who you are? What's going on?
I'll go.
Okay.
Tlingit Einach Statuka Yuchat Duasok Leika Gainach Erica George Yuchat Duasok Kutsnu Kwan Ayachat Tazant Kahin Ye Chat Yeti. I know nouns like everyone else, and I'd like to learn how to put them together so I can speak in clearer sentences or questions. I'd like to learn how to listen better, to hear what the other person is saying and fully understand it. That would be awesome. That's it.
Okay, there's Cheesh. So I'm pretty confident that you all are going to get to this spot where there's a bit of a wrestling match going on in your brain, and the English side is continually wanting translations. And so what'll happen is someone will be talking and you'll be following, then all of a sudden, like there's this gap, and you're like, what just happened? Like I was in, and now I don't know. And I think that's your brain when it starts running out of that translation energy. But when you do get to a point where you can actually let go of that need, it's kind of scary, because it's sort of like when I was in Hawaii, I asked a guy, I was like, how'd you learn how to swim? Because you guys get the ocean all around you. He's like, oh, my dad took me on a boat and he threw me in the water. And it's like, and so we're not going to do that, but at some point you're going to kind of have to let go of whatever it is, the boat or the life raft. And again, it's getting into the deep waters as well sometimes, where maybe there is no translation for that thing. And Tlingit has hundreds of hours of recorded Tlingit, hundreds and hundreds of hours, and probably less than 1% of that has been translated. So there's lots of translation work to be done. There's lots of resources out there. You really have to put the language around yourself all the time. Just, when I started learning Tlingit, we had hundreds of speakers. And so you could hang out with them. Even like I was in a community, Skagway, where there was maybe only 30 Native people there. And one of them was a speaker. And so I could go and talk to her. And so, but as that continues to shift, we have to be the ones who become the speakers by putting it around us. And sometimes that means downloading some audio and adding that to our list of things and really sort of mastering that. And then we've got quite a bit of the audio for Hashuka. So some of the texts that the Downhowers have put out. So you could listen to the audio and then you could read it and you could read the translation, and then you could and then your brain already knows the English translation for it. So then you can just keep listening to it, and that lets you just do a lot of sort of behind the scenes work when you do that kind of stuff. You can also pick a particular story or speaker that you like, and you just keep hitting play and pause, and you hit play, then you hit pause, and then you just say it exactly like they say it. You just try and sound exactly like them, because that's a lot of the work we've got to do at this intermediate level too, is getting the rhythm and the cadence and just some of the elders that say it's the flavor. You got to get that flavor of Tlingit. You want to be able to taste it, and so, yeah. Okay, anybody else? We'll take a little break and then we'll look at a few things when we come back.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I don't know how to say it, but I'll just say English. My family is originally from Puna and Ankara, but I grew up in Seattle. What do I know about the language? I know a lot of words, but I feel like I don't know a lot of sentences, or like how to make sentences and like how to conversate. So I feel like I want to know how to conversate and like how to like hold conversations with people. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, finish cheesh. Yeah, so parts of that is like taken the phrase books that are out and just like continuing to master some of those phrases. But then a big part is taking another big leap. So before the leap of like, I'm not translating anymore, comes the leap of, I'm not just reciting things from memory. And that is another huge step for Tlingit learners, is to say, I'm actually going to assemble all this stuff. And so we are going to do quite a bit of work on like, what are all these individual pieces? How do you put them together? And it can be disorienting for some people. It could be frustrating. It could be exhausting, because we tend to sort of take things apart and then reconstruct them. But one of the reasons is that you already have a grammar in your mind, and we have to nest another one in there. And one of the things that really complicates it is that there's a colonial language in there. And I believe that colonial language gets a little bit grumpy about sharing space sometimes, just like colonial activities tend to do, right? And so sometimes you've got to deal with that head on, and sometimes just ignore it. But then sometimes you got to create that space. And so creating that space means moving beyond like, this chunk is this thing, to like, what are those individual little pieces, so I can start moving them around. And so we are going to be doing quite a bit of kind of drilling some stuff like that and going over some concepts, so that once you look at a verb, you'll know how to use it now. Like, okay, I just need to see it. I just need to see how it works. And now I can use it in all these different ways. Right? And for Tlingit, there's day-to-day stuff, which is great, and it's complicated. But then there's the big stuff. Like, I think probably 1 out of every 100 speakers maybe could do the really big things where you're, the grammar gets really complicated sometimes. And so when you look at some of those Raven stories, you'll see some stuff like the way that Raven talks. When they quote Raven in the stories, it's even really hard to translate. Like, he'll say, did anybody hear anything inside that whale? And they'll say, no. Then he'll say something like, did anybody maybe not hear anything inside that whale? Like, no. And be like, did anybody maybe could have not heard anything possibly inside? It just gets longer and more. But when you start doing that in Tlingit, like there's one that he says, Aduski kakanachan kachashi, and he would sing it, right? So Aduski kakanach ankachashi, which I think could roughly translate as, who could let a person cut a person out of this thing? Or who could let a person cut above a person, is really like the literal translation. But then he's usually saying like, who can cut me out of this whale? But then you just, anyways, it's fun. So like, sometimes like, we'll take a look at something and then we'll end up taking a look at a whole bunch of different things. But always just chime in if you feel like I'm too coffeeed up and then drifting all over the universe, because I do try to sort of answer the question, but sometimes I'll be just talking like, what was the question? Because I just been talking for like 20 minutes about all these different connected things. Okay, I'm gonna cheesh. I think we have 2 more. Do you want to talk? Or do you want to take a break first? Do you want to wait until next time?
I can go before the break.
Okay.
Shod thank you khatu sagwidi na khatsati ki ye khatyati. In Tlingit, I know some nouns and verbs, small sentences, some kute, and I want to learn how to speak more in depth with my Tlingit. And I also just want to learn more tools I can use to keep improving.
Hey, gonna cheesh. And so I'll try and point out things that are Keek specific when I know them. So okay, go ahead, Chance.
Chance you had to sock Illinois dach ayahat Zantakini ye hat yati Dasa Yiskuya. Ha you Hatangidata. Hooch.
Okay.
I yeah, this summer was a long one for me. Yeah. And I've just come back to this class hoping to learn just all that I can all over again.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, a lot of times when we do intermediate Tlingit, we might find folks who started and then stopped, and maybe they stopped for a long time, or they took a whole bunch and then they sort of felt like they backtracked for some reason. So because of that, we do a little bit of get to know you stuff, and then we just kind of start at the beginning and well, I mean, we won't do a whole bunch of like this. We'll do the sounds probably once, and then we'll just move through and just show you what the concepts are, so we can build on particular concepts. So, be brave. There's another great part in this Raven story where like there's this really amazing verb. I'll have to look it up because I always forget it. It's like I'm not gonna remember it. Cheo is how it ends, I think. And it means to give someone words of encouragement. Actually, I'll look it up right now. So I'll show you what I do when I can't remember particular things. So I'll usually go to the verb dictionary, what we used to call the yellow dictionary. And then I might type in the search bar, encourage. And then so I'll see comfort, katuwu yak seha, katuwu shita. So this is to literally to warm someone's spirit. This is to kind of erase something off the face of somebody's. Tuwu is spirit, thoughts, intentions. Could be kind of interpreted as any of those things. And then this one, yach ayach. So it's a complicated verb. But so Raven says to that little owl, he says, iyach ayach ayach. I'm going to urge you on. I'm going to give you encouragement. And so when his beak starts burning off, Raven says, Chatakat at yanik, chasyayanhan. So he yells at him, everything hurts. You just have to stand it. And we laugh so, when we're like going through these stories, we laugh so hard because we're like, that's pretty good, like Tlingit encouragement. It's like, yeah, it's going to be hard. And it's fun to just sort of laugh because we're not trying to dismiss anybody's suffering. But then sometimes that's something you need to hear as well. And so we'll talk about how to encourage people, how to encourage yourself, how to stick with it. Because like the reality is intermediate Tlingit is where most people get off the bus, get out of the boat. And so we don't want that to happen. So if you're feeling like frustrated, or you're feeling like you're ready to give up, reach out. Let's have a conversation about it, and let's figure out how to adjust the course, and let's figure out what you might need or what might help. And because sometimes there's other words of encouragement, but it was funny because it was Raven who convinced the owl to go get the fire, and then it'll be fine. But then he gave him that octopus beak, so it worked out in the end. Okay, let's take 5, come back. So refresh, stand up, do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Renee, would you mind typing that out, that everything hurts, you just have to stand it?
Yeah,
In the chat box.
Let me find it.
kind of reminds me of Joe and Smitty, how they taught us about Yukwai no matter what. You just got to go all the way. No fear.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta say it. Atunachya kikigut. You're gonna go through it.
Go through it all the way. Yeah.
Stand there and look at the cold water.
Yep.
Okay, we'll be right back. And really went through the pieces of it. I was like, this is phenomenal. Okay. Adeshatsiniya. Ye'awa adayaka. Yiduayach kwan. Kustishatzi nuch. Keshkekadashit. Anything from there?
How strong it is.
Yeah, so ade, verbi, yeah, the way that that verb happens. So I would say adeshatsini, yeah, the way to strength, maybe is one way to interpret that. Ye'awa adayaka. This is what this person is saying to this other person. Yidu ayakwan. Have strength and courage, be brave. There's multiple ways to interpret that and multiple ways to say it in Tlingit. You're going to hear people say yi gu ayakwan and yi du ayakwan. This is probably a verb. So I kind of interpret this as let it be like you're like a person sitting there. I don't know how to. There's certain phrases where it's like it's kind of frozen. And you can't pull it apart, because with a lot of things in Tlingit, you could pull it apart and see all the pieces. But then there's certain things like, well, here's the pieces, but when you say them in this order, it just works like this. Life is always hard. You're not gonna quit. You're not going to give up. Again, so this comes from, this is a retelling of a Qanachtedi story. And so he had told this story and he's Qanachtedi Yedi. And so I asked him if he would tell the story in Tlingit because he knew the story, because he heard Thomas Young used to say that story and give this speech. And we have a recording of the speech referring to the story. This is like, you got it. And then he did a lot of work at the front to say, you know, like, I'm a child of, this is why I'm telling it. And it's a wonderful story. And so this is part of that. Okay, last one for the evening.
Khune, I'm sorry. Could you just tell me what the first two lines again are? Wasn't able to get it. I know it's strength, but you said the ade, yea is not.
Yeah.
This is the way of strength.
So here's like a little fun cheat sheet type of thing. You could basically take any verb, you put the I, basically it's an I, sometimes it's a U. And I'll show you folks how to know which one it'll be. You put that I on there, and then you put yeah, and that's the place where that verb happened. So you could say, atwagut, he or she walked around. Like, let's say it's Raven, he walked around. Atwagudi, yeah, the place where he walked around. So that's what you do. You put you put the I and the yeah on there. Like we were just talking about place names, right? Anach ya andagan yeah, the place where the sun shines along, right? So if you put a day and then verb e yeah, now you have the way that verb happened. So again, this is just learning how to use some patterns to do cool stuff. So for ade atwugudi, yeah, the way he was walking around. And now I might want to say like, it was kind of strange or it was amazing, right? So I could say kunach ade yeah. It was amazing the way it was really great the way you talked, the way this verb happened. So that's what you get with ade and yeah, bookending it, right? And then you'll catch this in a bunch of speeches. Ade haskunuguye haklagu konkiyan. We're beginning to understand a little bit about the way our ancient people did things. Whole bunch of all of it is tied into this ade, yeah, right? And so you'll see, and this is one of those things where once you learn it, you'll start to spot it. They just sprinkle it around now and then. And then ye awa adaya ka. So this ka verb root is usually to like say something specific, right? And we'll get into like hearing, listening, speaking, saying, talking about, because we know shkachnik and kawanik and those ones have to do with telling something. But ye yawaka, she or he said this exact thing. Now we're getting into the hard quotation. And in the present tense of that, you're usually going to say, ye adayaka. She or he is saying this to them, right? And so there's a bunch of stuff that goes on with that stuff, which, again, we'll keep talking about. How do we know when to change that verb? And it's all predictable, but there's this huge network of things that we got to keep an eye on. And once this is where we learn how to, you got to think it, Tlingit. And once you start thinking and Tlingit, a lot of it has to do with which one of these verbs are you going to pick, and then knowing why you had to switch that verb in a certain situation. So he is saying, he's saying it to him, she's saying it to her, right? But you got to pick a gender, unfortunately. You could just say they are saying it to them. Be brave, have strength and courage. And so I could probably revise this and put this whole thing in quotation marks, right? Because that's what's happening, is this is the setup. So if you want to know how to do storytelling and stuff, ye yawaka, then that person said it. Ye ayawsaka, they said it to this other person. And so one thing is knowing when to switch the verb to start saying, oh yeah, they said it to somebody. And then the second part is knowing how to switch those parts. Oh yeah, and then I said to her, oh, then she said to me, right? That's what all this stuff is doing. A lot of moving parts, Don't freak out. Don't get nervous. You're gonna reach a point where you're like, oh yeah. And the fun part is when you can look at this stuff and be like, oh yeah, I remember I didn't know any of that stuff. And now I know like all of these different parts. The one wishkate, yigu ayakwan, yishish kohascha, yichet haswusa achidat. What can you guys pull out of that?
Be strong and have courage.
Yep.
Our grandchildren speak.
Your grandparents, your ancestors.
Oh, I don't know why I said grandchildren. I meant but it means they're speaking.
Well, in this case, like really, so what that yichet haswuse achidat. They are listening to you.
Mm.
So this is a critical concept. Same thing. She was quite elderly at the time. I had worked with Jessie a lot, and I went to her and I said, "What do these learners need to hear?" And she gave this fairly long speech, and right at the end, she's just moved into this like chant, where she said, "Yugu Ayachwan" 4 times, and after it, she would say something else. And this was the first one. It's like they're just sitting there listening to you. And I don't want you to feel intimidated. What I want you to realize is this is the moment our ancestors have been waiting for us to start to speak, for us to take that moment, take all these things that they left for us, and to start assembling it in our mind. And so the reason we start with these things is because they wanted to inspire us. They wanted us to keep going. They also, some of these elders, they saw at the very end of their life that things were changing. There were young people who were starting to speak, because I would say probably from right around the late 1950s, early 1960s, up until about the late 90s, nobody really learned to speak Tlingit. Like not a single like it's hard to find one person who learned in that 40-year gap, basically 30, 40-year gap. And so to see that, and to have lived through that, and to see all these speakers go, but then at the end you see this rising, it's like the tide's finally coming back in. And that's what we're a part of. And so we start with stuff like this, but then we'll pull it way back, and we'll probably revisit these throughout. I just like to, just these things that I heard people say, and it was moving to just see how they can use the language. Because for all of these speakers here, like they just do it. For me, like I gotta go and I gotta think, and I gotta, oh yeah, this thing, oh let me look this verb up, and then I gotta write it down. But just to see it in the moment, how they could assemble this stuff. And they did it for you. They wanted you to keep going. So welcome to day one. We just sort of plop into the deep waters, but then we'll go back to the beach, and we'll just get our toes in and go a little slower next time. Dasa?
I have a question. Can you explain to me the part, is there a difference between listening and hearing?
Yeah.
Because I think of ha'ach, I'm hearing them
right
now.
Right. So what happens, right in here, you have a classifier. Every verb has a root and a classifier, although the classifier might be technically nothing, but I still think it's there. So when it's the zero group, it's often just happening. So the zero group is like, it looks like ya or nothing. So that's the one when it turns into hwa'ach. I heard it. I heard that. But if now let's say there's a bump in the night, right? That's the time when you're like, wait, now let me start listening, right? Is it the monster, or is it just something outside, right? So then when this switches to an S, sometimes the reason it switches is because it's not just happening, somebody's doing the thing now. So this is, in Tlingit, seeing and watching are two different verbs, right? So you say chatin and then chachatin. In this case, chwa'ach, chwase'ach. I was listening. And so these are important distinctions. And this is why we'll understand what the classifier is, what it does. Because same thing, there's a whole bunch of verbs that are like that. So you could say, chat yanik, I'm sick, which I don't want to be sick, just to let the universe know. But then I could say, chat yisanik, you gave me a cold, you got me sick. There's that classifier switch. And it's pretty common that's what it does. It says it didn't just happen. Yishlik, you made it better. Yak, it's good. Yeah, and we'll look at some specific examples of stuff just like that. But starting Thursday, we're just going to go back to the beginning, do a bit of a walkthrough, and make sure if there's any gaps. So as we're going, if you got a question, ask the question. Don't let the moment pass by, and then you're like, oh, I wonder why that. Just ask it, because I want to make sure we understand all this stuff, and then we move into the intermediate material, which is a lot of just building these blocks, and we'll talk about how we're doing it, why we're doing it. But now we're out of time, so Gulchish. We'll see.
Gulchish.
I'll probably send you all a new link.
Cheesh.
Cheesh.
Okay.
Cheesh.
So yeah, kwasatin, klakachahan.
Okay.